ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يؤتي الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وكونوا مع الصادقين. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Today I want to talk to you about three things that affect the Muslim world very profoundly. One is the crisis of security, the other is the crisis of governance, and the third one is the crisis of knowledge. Today, if you look at the Muslim world, relatively speaking, the entire world is much more safer than the Muslim world. We would call it Darul Islam, and the word Islam comes from peace. So Darul Islam should mean the land and territory of peace, but it is the most unpeaceful territory in the world. After Shaybani and Imam Shafi'i, the Muslims used to divide the world into Darul Islam and Darul Harb. Darul Islam was that territory where Muslims lived and practiced Islam, and Darul Harb was the territory of those who did not believe and practice Islam. But if you look at the factual definition, this is the house of war and house of peace. Right now the Muslim world has become house of war, factually speaking, not from a Shari perspective, but from the perspective of haqiqa, reality. Why is it that? One of the most bizarre, besides the tragedy and besides the pain, one of the most bizarre aspects of Muslim reality is that if you look at the countries of Iraq and Syria, the whole world is attacking it. Literally the whole world is bombing people who live in those two countries. Doesn't matter where you're from. Saudi Arabia just sent jets to Turkey to bomb Iraq and Syria from Turkey. United Arab Emirates was bombing it. Jordan took great pride. Even the king of Jordan wore Air Force fatigues to announce that he was going to reduce that territory to rubble. Russia is bombing it. The US is, Germans. It seems that everybody is bombing Muslim countries. This is what I mean by lack of security. And you know the tragedy of this is that one of the most striking aspects, the first time I went to Turkey, the first time I went to Morocco, the first time I went to Egypt, was this stunning aspect of lack of violent crime. You could walk anywhere in Cairo, 3 o'clock, at 4 o'clock, take a cab, nobody hurts you. I used to live in downtown and then go all the way to Nasr City to see my cousin and sit and chat with him. At 4 a.m. I would take the cab. The only risk was that the cab driver probably knew Urdu and was a fan of Bollywood, and you would have to suffer for 2 hours while he regales you with his knowledge of Bollywood. Morocco is unbelievable, except for the city of Fez, where there is a little bit organized crime. There is no organized crime in Morocco. The same with Turkey. One of the most safest parts of the world when it comes to ordinary life, but when it comes to issues of war and peace, the most insecure part of it. What is it that makes the Muslim world so insecure? When I'm using the word secure, I don't mean from a safety perspective. I mean from a diplomatic and war and peace perspective. Lack of security, lack of national security, lack of international security. It is the profoundest in the Muslim world. One of the largest consumers of weapons, but also one of the largest users of weapons. There are others who can buy weapons, like India and Saudi Arabia and China, but they don't use it. The second aspect of this Muslim world is the crisis of governance. One of the worst governed places on earth is the Muslim world. State after state is collapsing and failing. Afghanistan has been a failed state for more than 25 years. Somalia, Iraq, Syria. Egypt on the verge of becoming a failed state. If billions of dollars were not coming in foreign aid, it will collapse. Sometimes it's faster to walk in Cairo than to drive. You can see from the state of traffic itself that there is no proper governance. And the third and the most critical aspect is the crisis of knowledge. The Muslim world is the only world today in this age of knowledge. We live in the information age, remember that. In this age of knowledge, we seem to have a wall between us and knowledge. If you went back 300 years in time and put together all the knowledge that the world have, less than that is available on the smallest version of iPhone. 8 gigabytes will carry the whole knowledge. I have the entire hadith in my pocket. The whole thing. All of them. Including, I'm talking of Imam Hanbal's, that's 20,000 collection. Okay. Many tafsirs of the Quran. And then other forms of knowledge. Well, this little bit. This is the age of knowledge. Very profound. In the past, scholars used to travel from country to country in search of a book. You know, when Muslim scholars used to go around, why did they memorize books? Imam Shafi'i had memorized the entire Muwatta because there were no hard copies easily available or PDFs that you could email each other. When a scholar traveled to Damascus in search of knowledge, he would go there, request the scholar who had the book, and I look at the book, and then he would first thing do is copy it. Sit there and copy it with hand and then leave or memorize the book. Because the books were not available. Knowledge was valued when there was so little knowledge. Now there is so much knowledge available and we don't value it. But there is even more profound aspects to this crisis of knowledge. We distinguish between what is true knowledge and what is false knowledge. For example, there is this debate going on within the Muslim community on creationism. And the people who are talking to me and asking me that we need to have a discussion are medical doctors who don't believe in creationism. But the funny part is when they take their exams, they have to believe in it. If they approach their biological and scientific exams from the perspective of I don't believe in evolution and I believe in creationism, they will lose their licenses to practice medicine. So they go there and do what? I don't know. I mean, how do you describe what you're doing at that time when you're taking this exam and compartmentalizing your brain and saying, my iman is here, my ilm is here. How can that be? What we have done is we have disassociated ilm from iman. So we have a box called iman and a box called knowledge. And even in the knowledge we have many boxes. One box is for professional knowledge, or which only get you jobs. And the other knowledge is maybe deen-related knowledge. When you need to do Umrah, you find out about it. When you need to do Hajj, you find out about it. That's why sometimes I jokingly say that Muslims' brains are in their shoes. And we leave it outside when we come into the masjid. Because we are not very rational, we are not very scientific in our approach to our deen. And it has created knowledge. So we now have a huge problem of who is a scholar? Of who is a scholar? A few years ago, I remember in Washington when there was discussion of cloning, and the possibility that we would clone a human being came up, and it was a major crisis. So who would you go and trust? Would you ask your imam, who has never taken biology beyond 8th grade, who probably is not even so fluent in English that he can actually read the scientific papers and figure out what it is? Or will you go to the doctor and ask the doctor what is the meaning of cloning who has never read the Quran? So that is the situation where we are in. And part of it is because our world was colonized. And those people who lived in colonized countries, what happened was when foreign schools came in, and people started teaching you in foreign languages, whether it's English or French and German, missionaries also came. And so they started using regular schools like in India and Egypt to convert people. And so a lot of Muslims became afraid of the so-called modern knowledge because it was converting kids to Christianity, stayed at home and created an alternate pathway called madrasas. So you now have different pathways. Even if you go to say Morocco, you can either do schools where they teach you in Arabic or go to schools where they teach you in French. Now this compartmentalization of knowledge has led to Muslims thinking of knowledge in a divided sense. One is for jobs and the other is for akhirah. And it has become divided. Now because of that, which means that knowledge is like a shirt. So I come to give you a khutbah, I wear this shirt. In the evening, if I have to go to the university to give a lecture, I take the shirt out, wear a different shirt and wear a tie and a suit and go. These are all external decorations. They don't make who I am. They don't shape my heart. They don't shape my mind. Knowledge can't be an external garment that we wear. It has to be something profoundly inside us that shapes what we think and shapes what we believe. Both Iman and our akhbar has to be shaped by knowledge. And because we have this crisis of knowledge as to what is knowledge and who is knowledgeable, that is not clear in the Muslim world. Even in the matters of deen today, we don't know. I had one very interesting conversation with Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi in his house. Spent a whole day with him. Incredible man. At 85, when I met him, he was 85. He's 89 now. At 85, he was so sharp, and I told him jokingly, if the Ummah was one-third as sharp as you, we would have solved a lot of problems. But he also was saying lots of interesting things, and we had a conversation, and he said, why don't you write about that? I think that's a good idea. I said, if I write about that, I'm going to be dead. He said, don't worry. Go ahead and write. Because I didn't know that apparently people had given him various nicknames. One of them was Mullah Halal, because he made everything halal in his book Halal wal Haram fil Islam. But what was also interesting was lately in England they have issued fatwas against Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi and calling him Murtad. It is ridiculous. None of the people who have issued those fatwas against him are wanted as learned as he is about fiqh. But they're issuing fatwas against him. If this man is not a believer, we may have dispute with his politics, that is different, but on the matters of Aqidah, he has it straight. A lot of people have learned it from him. So the problem is that we don't even know who is a knowledgeable person and who is not a knowledgeable person, whom to follow and whom not to follow. So a lot of our kids then go and listen to charismatic jihadis and go join ISIL. Because they are not able to determine that, okay, he may be a fantastic speaker, but what he is saying is incorrect. Because we do not have, we have lost this capacity to distinguish between what is knowledge and what is not, and who is knowledgeable and who is not. Societies which do not pursue politics based on knowledge are doomed to get ruined. There's a reason why Prophet ﷺ said, go all the way to China if you need to acquire knowledge. Prophet ﷺ also said that wisdom is the lost property of the believer. Claim it wherever you see it. So if you go to Russia and if you see something very sharp and wise, embrace it as your lost ilm. Don't say just because it's not coming from the Quran, it's not coming from the Hadith, it's not ilm. No, it is the lost tradition. Oh, this is a tradition from the Prophet ﷺ. That's why he said, you can go to China, because he knew that knowledge and wisdom is not monopolized by just Muslims. And it is because of these three crises that the Muslim world is in the state it is. We are so behind on sciences. Look at them. If I were to ask you a question, which are the biggest inventions of this century, they're coming from here, this country that we live in. Aeroplanes, computers, spaceships, the internet, artificial hearts. Which are the biggest innovations in the last 10 years or 20 years? Google. Even things like Facebook and Twitter, which enabled the Arab Spring, are inventions from this society. And we constantly keep thinking it is morally wrong, it's wrong, misguided, etc., etc., etc. and also constantly on the decline, by the way. Since I have grown up, I've been hearing about America's decline. Where is the sciences? When you ask Muslims, they will go back to algebra. Yes, we invented algebra, yeah, but do you know what is the latest theories of algebra? Yes, we invented chemistry, but where are? There are some Muslims who are winning. A few years ago, an Egyptian got the Nobel Prize, but guess where he was? In Los Angeles. Last year, a Turkish American got a Nobel Prize, but where was he? Since he was 18, he was in the University of North Carolina. So he comes here, and then the culture is, and his mind has been nurtured. It is because we do not have science, a scientific way of thinking, that we lag behind in military strength. And that is why there is no security in the Muslim world. If Muslim countries were strong in science, they would be militarily strong. And they would be safe. Even Saudi Arabia is attacking countries now. Of course, it picked the weakest one, Yemen. Saudis will never attack Israel. You want to fight, go pick someone who is what? Saudi Arabia is about 30 million, Israelis are 7, 8 million, 1/3 your size in population, 1/10 your size in economy. Go beat this little tiny one and we will see how strong your iman is, how strong your power is. You just pick the poorest country on earth after Afghanistan and you blast it and blast it and blast it. If Yemen was militarily strong, no one would attack it. When Iran became strong, the US made peace with it. I have written this in 2003 and 2004. We can go and find it and said this face to face in the White House and in the Pentagon, that the fact that the US is willing to attack Iraq is proof that Iraq does not have nuclear weapons. You understand? If it had, we would not attack it. And the reason why we have never attacked North Korea is because we know it has nuclear weapons. That was a trump. Once you become powerful, you become safe. The reason why the Muslim world has a crisis of security is because it has abandoned science. And the reason why it has a crisis of governance is because it has abandoned social science. Who invented algebra? Muslims. Who invented social science? Ibn Khaldun. Today, go and just Google Ibn Khaldun's name. All conferences everywhere. We are just trying to tell the West, Muslims are not backward. We are not. We have Ibn Khaldun. He invented Ilm al-Umran, the science of civilization. He invented sociology. He invented philosophy of history. Did you know that in the last 20 years of his life, Ibn Khaldun, he was a very tragic figure. He saw his whole family drown in the harbor of Cairo 1 year after he moved. And he spent his last few years as a judge in Cairo and as a professor at Al-Azhar University. But his books were never taught in Al-Azhar until the 20th century. It is an amazing thing. We rejected Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Khaldun is only for advertising of the Muslim world. All the things that we were proud of, this so-called golden age, the invention of sciences, etc., we reject those people on religious grounds. They are zindiq, they are this, they are that, etc. So we have had this tension with science from the very beginning, and then furthermore with social science. It's sometimes difficult to argue with science because they say, well, this thing is going to fly, and they can prove it. That will fly. Every Muslim who goes to take surgery done, who allows himself to be put under anesthesia, and lets people cut their chest open, is taking shahada that he believes in modern science. You understand? What bigger proof of shahada do you need? But with social sciences, it's much, much more difficult. If I say that if you're democratic, you will become prosperous, it's not easy to prove that right away. It is the absence of social science which has made the Muslim world ungovernable. It's absence of science which leads to insecurity. It's absence of social science which means there's no knowledge of how to govern. If we make this policy, what will it lead to? How will you know that unless you do studies? Unless you put the policy in place and test it. And then you should be ready to reject that if it's not working. But if you use religion to justify policies, whether they work or not, then you have put yourself in a trap where you can't reject policies which fail because now you have tied your iman to it. Do you see the problem? Because you are justifying policies without empirical scientific evidence using religious texts. You can't then reverse on those policies if they fail because now you're saying that Islam doesn't work, na'uzubillah. The second problem that we have is the crisis of governance, and that is because of the crisis. So these three crises, I think, are fundamental. We have to really make sure that for our children who are growing up, and they give them the freedom to think. You must understand that thinking is one of the biggest gifts from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Aql is one of the biggest gifts from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the maqasid of Islamic Sharia is to protect aql, the 5 pillars, the things that we try to defend. Protect through the Sharia, 5 maqasid. One of them is aql, reason, the capacity to think. That is very important. And what I'm trying to tell you is not some modern philosophical thinking. This is straight from the Quran. Wallahi. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Imran, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, Inna fi khalqis samawati wal ard wa ikhtilafil layli wan nahari la ayatin lil ulil albab. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, behold the creation in the heavens and the earth and the alteration of the night and the day, there are signs for people of understanding. Ulul albab. Who are the ulul albab? Have you heard this word? How often have you heard this word? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, the translations are, these are the people of understanding, these are the people of intellect, these are the people of hikmah. But who are they? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that when you see the creation of the heavens and the earth, when he says see, he's asking you to observe, to indulge in a scientific exercise of studying creation. And look at the changes in the night and the day. It's not just get up in the morning and look at it. It means the variety and diversity and changes that are there in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are signs for it. Ayat, same word. It's like the Quran's ayat. The sign that you see in nature is another ayat. That's why some scholars say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given Muslims 2 books. And both are full of ayats. One is the Quran and the other is creation. Both are Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's tajalliyat. They are manifestations of God. So Sayyid Ahmed Khan, not my relative, well, I would like to get into this one, said very interestingly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's words and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's works can't be in contradiction. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's words are the Quran, and Allah ta'ala's work is the creation. Alimul Khalq, that is created. So what you find through science will not contradict what you find through revelation. So why are we afraid of using our scientific thinking? Go out there, think for yourself. The Prophet ﷺ said, those who do ijtihad and get it right, there are 2 rewards for them. But those who do ijtihad and get it wrong, there's still 1 reward for them. There's nothing negative. I have never encountered in any religious tradition such a profound license to think. God is saying, the Prophet ﷺ is sending the message to you that even if you get it wrong, God is going to reward you. It's like what we do in schools today here. Give people reward for coming 10th. The liberal educational model. Build everybody self-esteem. The Prophet ﷺ already said, if you're wrong, you get 1. If you're right, you get 2. To go out and think. But who are these ulul albab? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defines it, doesn't leave it to us. He says in the Quran, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, Alladhina yaskuruna Allaha qiyaman wa qu'udan wa ala junubihim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that who are these people? They are those who remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala while they are standing, while they are sitting, while they are lying on their side. It means all the time, not just those 3 times. People who are constantly aware of God. I saw a beautiful sign outside a church which said that religiosity is when a man is sitting in the church, when he's supposed to be in the church and thinking of fishing. His body is in the church, but his mind is on a picnic. But spirituality is when you're on the boat fishing, but you're thinking of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You understand? That's the difference. So that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying is, that's the kind of person I want. Those who remember me all the time. never become ghafil. Imagine that for one moment you forget Allah and you die in that moment. May Allah save us from that particular, right? All of us cannot forget Him even for a moment. Remembering while you're standing, while you're sitting, while you're lying down. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says more to Him. وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. And those who reflect, تَفَكَّرُونَ, think about the heavens and the earth. He's not separating. He's talking about those who remember Allah and those who think about His creation. The one who is the Sufi and the one who is the scientist. You have to put them both together. If you just say, I'll just remember Allah and forget about the rest, no, it's unacceptable. And I will just do my science and then forget about remembering God. That is also not. You have to bring them both. It is like saying, I can't be a Muslim just through my mind, and I can't be a Muslim just through my heart. You have to have both aligned. Okay? When you say yatafakkaru, you're talking about the mind, fikr. And when you're talking of yatazakkaru, you're talking about the heart. Your heart and your mind has to be aligned in the same direction, and that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying. These are the people who are ulul albab, who remember Allah all the time, who reflect on His sign. مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, I have not created this universe, anything just for no purpose. There is a purpose behind it. And one of the biggest purpose of creation is to manifest Himself so that you may know Him. How can we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? By looking at His signs. Some are in the Quran, some are in the universe. Some are on the horizon, some are inside our hearts. So learn to read His signs. A good Muslim is like the Native American tracker. You know what the tracking they used to do? They can follow the tracks, they can follow the signs. And that is what we have to learn, how to follow the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so that we can find Him. He will find us anywhere. But He wants to see if we will struggle to find Him. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Subhanak wa qina azab. Indeed, He is pleased and will save us from the fire. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He makes Muslims truly understand the connection between our realities and knowledge. True happiness is the pursuit of knowledge. That's what Al-Farabi said. True happiness is pursuit of knowledge. We define Islam as the opposite of Jahiliyyah. So Islam is nothing but enlightenment. You can't be Muslim and ignorant. أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم. Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala Rasulullah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Kitabun anzalnahu ilayka mubarakan. I have revealed this book to you which is blessed. I have revealed this book لِيَدَّبَّرُوا آيَاتِهِ. I have revealed this noble, this Mubarak book to you with verses upon which you must deliberate. يَدَّبَّرُوا. He didn't just reveal it so that you just memorize it and recite in Salah. He wants you to do tadabbur, to reflect, to meditate. One of the best translations of tadabbur is to deliberate on the meanings of these ayahs, like we are doing right now. So look at these verses and to reflect upon them. Every time you reflect on an ayah of the Quran, you are seeing different aspects of God's message, you are seeing different manifestations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself, and you're coming closer and closer to Him, both through your heart and through your mind. So you have to do this. وَلِيَتَذَكَّرُ أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ. And these are the verses, these are the signs that the people of intellect memorize. People of intellect remember. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this magic. We live in an age of information. In fact, we should be called as Waqt al-Ulul al-Bab. This is the period of the people of the intellect. You can't just get up on a horse and wave a knife and go win the battle. You know, somebody sitting in Nevada can take you out with a toy. With a toy. When the Taliban were hiding in the caves, some of the US soldiers bought, you know, those RC trucks that you get in Radio Shacks, little trucks that kids play with. They installed a camera on it and a light machine gun on it and a battery torch light on it, and sent that thing in outside sitting with their laptops watching what is inside. And the machine gun was shot remote control. Literally toys from Radio Shack. It's a creative way of thinking. So what is interesting is that it is important for us to understand that there is a connection between knowledge and power, between knowledge and good governance, between knowledge and identity. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, pursue hikmah wherever you find. I'm going to read a little bit of a hadith for you. I can't read the whole thing because it's very long, and I don't think I have the time for it. But I want you all to find it. It's very easy to find because there are not many hadiths narrated by Khalid ibn Walid. This hadith was reported by Khalid ibn Walid. And he says that I was sitting with the Prophet ﷺ when a man came and asked certain questions. You are all familiar with the hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam. He came. Jibreel asked those questions in front of a lot of people, so when the Prophet ﷺ gave answers, that was one way of teaching. I consider it the first jointly taught class between the Prophet ﷺ and Jibreel alayhi salam. We were co-teaching Muslims. But this is another similar hadith in which we don't know who the person is who is asking this question, but he asks many questions, and the Prophet ﷺ gives answers. And the reason why I'm reading is to give you an example of how a person who has hikmah thinks of these things. The man said, I would like to be the most learned of people. And the Prophet ﷺ said, fear Allah and you will be the most learned of men. Connected ilm with taqwa. I wish to be the richest man in the world, he said. The Prophet ﷺ said, be contented and you will be the richest man in the world. I would like to be the most just man, he said. He must have been a great guy. He wanted to be very great. And the Prophet ﷺ said, desire for others what you desire for yourself and you will be the most just of people. He said, I want to be the best of men. The Prophet ﷺ said, do good to others and you will be the best of men. He said, I want to be the most favored by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet ﷺ, if you have good manners, you have completed your faith and you will be favored by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, I would like Allah to bestow His mercy on me on the day of judgment, forgive my sins. And the Prophet ﷺ said, if you have mercy on yourself and others, Allah will have mercy on you. I mean, it's a win-win deal. Everybody is nice to yourself. I would like my sins to be very few. And the Prophet ﷺ, if you seek the forgiveness of Allah as much as you can, your sins will be very few. The man then said, I would like to be the most honorable of men. The Prophet ﷺ said, if you do not complain to any fellow creature, you will be the most honorable of men. This is one of the most difficult ones to understand. Do not complain. When you complain, you are actually expressing dissatisfaction with the conditions in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed you. You may not be profound and smart enough to understand that you are maligning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when you are doing that and expressing dissatisfaction. Be content. That is very important. And Allah subhanahu, that's why the Prophet ﷺ, he is the most honorable of men, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will honor him on the day of judgment. He said, I would like to be loved by Allah and His Messenger. He said, if you love what Allah and His Messenger love, you will be among the ones who are beloved. I wish to be saved from Allah's anger on the day of judgment. If you do not lose your temper with any of your fellow creatures, you will be saved from the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment. I would like my prayers to be responded, he said. The Prophet ﷺ said, if you avoid forbidden actions, your prayers will be responded. I would like Allah to provide me with a protective covering on the day of judgment. This is very important. You want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect you on the day of judgment. And the Prophet ﷺ says, do not uncover your fellow creatures false, and Allah will provide you with a covering protection on the day of judgment. Do not go around saying bad things about other people. You don't want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to put on a PowerPoint list of your bad deeds on the day of judgment so all of humanity can see it. You cover other people's bad deeds on the day of judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will cover. Those of you who are familiar will realize that there are many ahadiths which refer to each of these answers. Each of these answers has several of its own separate hadiths which confirm this. And finally, what assuages the wrath of Allah in this life and the hereafter? What is it that makes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala less angry with you here and later? And the Prophet ﷺ said, concealed charity and kindness to relatives. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us the capacity to develop and understand the wisdom that is there in our sources, appreciate knowledge, absorb knowledge, allow knowledge and truth to shape us, and then hopefully it will shape our actions, the choices we make as individuals, as communities, and it will shape the reality of our societies. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة وحسنة وقنا عذاب النار إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر بغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون أقيموا الصلاة.
Brothers, keep moving to your left.